The United Nations is referring to the 3-year conflict in Sudan as an abandoned crisis, warning the scale of atrocities has so far failed to make the world react.
US President Donald Trump refuses to apologize after his attacks on Pope Leo XIV, after the pontiff had called the Iran war unacceptable.
Greenpeace has warned that the potential collapse of the inner protective shell at the Chernobyl nuclear power plant could have a catastrophic impact. The UN is referring to the 3-year conflict in Sudan as, quote, an abandoned crisis, warning that the scale of atrocities has so far failed to make the world react. Briefing reporters virtually from Khartoum, the UN resident and humanitarian coordinator for Sudan, Dennis Brown, said the situation has become a cycle of suffering with no end in sight, particularly for women and girls.
A plea from me, please don't call this a forgotten crisis. I'm referring to this as an abandoned crisis.
The warning comes as Sudan marks 3 years since sliding into chaos when a power struggle between the military and paramilitary rapid support forces broke out into a civil war. According to the World Food Programme, some 21.2 million people are facing acute hunger.
3 years of war in Sudan have created the world's largest humanitarian crisis. The conflict has ravaged livelihoods, uprooted communities, and driven millions of people into hunger. Famine still stalks parts of this country. Aid workers, trucks, and warehouses continue to come under attack, putting the lives of our colleagues at risk and disrupting our assistance.
The WFP warns that Sudan's hunger crisis now risks being worsened by the escalation of the conflict in the Middle East, as disruptions in the Red Sea delay critical imports and push up the cost of food, fuel, and fertilizer.
US President Donald Trump refuses to apologize for his attacks on Pope Leo XIV after the pontiff had called the Iran war unacceptable. Trump has faced widespread backlash for his criticism of the Pope, including by Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni, who issued a statement supporting the pontiff.
No, I don't, because Pope Leo said things that are wrong. He was very much against what I'm doing with regard to Iran, and you cannot have a nuclear Iran. Pope Leo would not be happy with the end result. You have hundreds of millions of people dead, and it's not going to happen. So I can't. I think he's very weak on crime and other things.
Pope Leo XIV pushed back on Trump, telling reporters he doesn't fear the Trump administration and reiterating the Vatican's stance on peace and reconciliation.
I do not look at my role as being politician. I don't want to get into a debate with him. I don't think that the message of the gospel is meant to be abused in the way that some people are doing. And I will continue to speak out loudly against war, looking to promote peace.
Meanwhile, Trump caused further backlash over an image posted on his Truth Social depicting himself as a Jesus-like figure. The post has since been deleted as the US president claims the image was supposed to depict him as a doctor. Greenpeace has warned that a potential collapse of the inner radiation shelter at the defunct Chernobyl nuclear power plant could trigger a catastrophic release of radioactivity into the environment. The warning comes just days before the 40th anniversary of the Chernobyl disaster. In 1986, a reactor at the plant exploded, releasing radioactive clouds across much of Europe in what remains the worst nuclear disaster in history. Following the disaster, an inner steel and concrete structure was built around the destroyed reactor to prevent further radiation leaks. Years later, a high-tech dome was built around the structure for additional protection. However, last year, a Russian drone struck this outer shell, and Greenpeace said that despite some works, the protective shield could not yet be fully repaired. The organization has now warned that this increases the risk of radioactivity release, especially in the case of a collapse of the internal structure. But further works to the site have been impeded by Russia's ongoing attacks. In addition to Greenpeace's warning, the plant's director has also warned that if a rocket were to land near the facility, the structure could be at risk of collapsing due to the impact.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky and German Chancellor Friedrich Merz have announced a strategic defense partnership on Tuesday. The agreement focuses on deepening military cooperation, including drone technology, as Europe seeks to learn from Ukraine's battlefield experience in its war with Russia.
Україна готова зробити свій внесок. Ми запропонували Німеччині угоду щодо дронів, двосторонню дрон-діл, різних типів дронів, ракет, софту та сучасної оборони. Наші команди починають конкретну роботу.
Ukraine's defense industry has ramped up production, with most weapons now used on the front lines made domestically.
Зброя, яку використовує сьогодні Україна для різних видів операцій, long range, на полі бою, захист неба тощо, більшість цієї продукції виробляється сьогодні в Україні. І звідси йде наш дрон-діл з різними країнами. Обсяг можливості в 2 рази більше, ніж ми використовуємо сьогодні нашого українського виробництва.
Ukraine has already signed 10-year agreements with Saudi Arabia, Qatar and the UAE. It is also in talks with Kuwait, Oman, Turkey as well as Syria.
According to Ukrainian Foreign Minister, Sunday's Hungarian elections produced a positive European result that opens up new opportunities for the two countries.
Ми сподіваємося, що це відкриє нову сторіночку в наших двосторонніх відносинах з Угорщиною. Ми налаштовані на...
Ukrainian political scientist Petro Olishuk believes that the new Hungarian government will soon lift its veto on the EU loan intended for Ukraine.
З'являється інформація про те, що новий уряд швидше за все розблокує кредит для України на 90 мільярдів євро, а також не буде блокувати новий пакет антиросійських санкцій. Причому робити він це буде з цілком прагматичних міркувань. Мадяр ще перед виборами оголошував про те, що його головна мета – це відновлення відносин з Європейським Союзом, розблокування всіх коштів, які були виділені Європейським Союзом, але заморожені через політику уряду Орбана.
Russia expects that the extremely pragmatic bilateral relations will continue with the new Hungarian leadership, the Russian president's press secretary stated. Dmitry Peskov told the Russian news portal Life that the Kremlin will not congratulate Peter Magyar on his victory.
At Milan's Linate airport on Sunday, only 34 passengers boarded an EasyJet flight to the UK, leaving 122 people behind in Italy, watching their plane depart without them. This travel chaos was the result of the EU's new entry-exit system being introduced at airport border control over the weekend. There were queues of up to 3 hours and reports of stranded passengers missing flights. The biometric control system was officially introduced across the Schengen area on Friday and is now in place in 29 European countries. For non-EU travelers on short stays, the system replaces manual passport stamping with digital records. It collects facial images and fingerprints along with passport details. Airlines for Europe has called 3 hours of queuing at border control a systemic failure. The interest group called on the European Commission to suspend the system until the end of summer. Fatou, the world's oldest gorilla living in captivity, has celebrated her 69th birthday with a feast on Monday, munching on cherry tomatoes, beets, leeks and lettuce at the Berlin Zoo. There was no birthday cake, as sugar isn't healthy for the aging primate. A western lowland gorilla, Fatou arrived in what was then West Berlin in 1959. She was believed to be about 2 years old at the time. Gorillas can live for around 40 years in the wild and longer in captivity. Fatou was likely born in the wild in Western Africa, but the story goes that a French sailor captured and bartered her to cover his bar tab in Marseille, France, according to the Guinness World Records. A French animal trader then reportedly sold her to the zoo. These days, Fatou lives in an enclosure of her own and prefers to keep her distance from the zoo's other gorillas. She has lost her teeth and she suffers from arthritis and hearing loss. She's friendly with the zookeepers, but can be a bit stubborn at times. Well, after a life of captivity for the entertainment of humans, let's say she's earned it.
C'est un tableau qui est peint alors qu'il est sur un petit bateau. Il se fait construire un bateau-atelier, il se met sur ce bateau-atelier, il sillonne la Seine et il peint sur son bateau. C'est pour ça qu'on a dans les îlots de Port-Villers un aspect très immersif. On est vraiment au niveau de l'eau. Donc c'est un tableau qui est peint avec une touche très large, très spontanée, ce qui est très caractéristique des débuts de l'impressionnisme. C'est très caractéristique de l'art de Monet qui aimait beaucoup en fait le système des séries. On l'a vu avec les nymphéas, les cathédrales de Rouen, les meules. Il se met exactement au même endroit et il va peindre le même sujet mais sous une atmosphère différente, à un horaire différent. Ici, on a une vue peinte le matin. Donc on a une lumière très spécifique avec des tonalités dans l'eau absolument magnifiques faites de mauve, de rose.